The prison industrial complex, a system rooted in slavery and capitalism. Now, what exactly is a prison industrial complex? Well, according to these sources, one by Cracked, it is the rise of the drug war and its effects on our prison system, implementing mass incarceration and for-profit prisons. According to Whitehorn abolitionists, it is the repression of resistance dating back to Reconstruction. Prison as a system represses communities. According to Mary Hook, the prison industrial complex is a web of booby traps with different ways, mechanisms, and systems, rules, and players that benefit off of the suffering of Black people. These sources combine and essentially say that the prison industrial complex is a tool used to repress those in the prison, as a system used to keep prisoners in slavery. Now, how exactly did the prison industrial complex come to be? The prison industrial complex came to be from the war on drugs in the 70s, enacted by the Nixon administration. It was a set of policies used to reduce drug use in the United States. However, these policies blatantly targeted marginalized communities such as African Americans and Latinos. They targeted these communities during the 70s to keep communities of people of color down. This surge in convicted people of color created the perfect environment for an endless cycle of mistreatment. And this mistreatment was conducted through 3 ways. Conditioning, where the prison industrial complex conditioned low-class people of color to fit in with prison. Dehumanization, where the prison industrial complex stripped prisoners of dignity reminiscent with slavery. And capitalism, where prisons are a for-profit business through slave labor. Conditioning. Mary Hook, an abolitionist, describes the prison industrial complex as a web of multiple groups, people benefiting off of people of color suffering. As explained in the beginning, she described it as different ways and mechanisms and systems and rules and players that benefit off of the suffering of in this instance, Black people being pushed into cages. One example of the system is school, often referred to as the school to prison pipeline. Schools in low-income areas, which are predominantly filled with people of color, the education in low-income areas prioritize discipline, with simple misdemeanors resulting in suspension and expulsion. We see this through the zero-tolerance policy, where if one student gets in trouble, they are immediately kicked out, no questions asked, due to a zero-tolerance policy. Another way that schools condition students is with police occupying schools. The presence of police trains low-income students to be complacent in the presence of police. This police presence does not protect the students in any way, shape, or form, but it establishes authority at a very young age, telling students that the police are on top of the food chain. Students are drilled into prime candidates for prison, so when they are out of prison, prisons already have candidates to fill them. The prison industrial complex benefits off of training prisoners from a young age by enforcing decade-long cycles of oppression. Police instill fear, as seen here, as seen in an instance that occurred on September 27, 2021. A high school student by the name of Manuela Rodriguez was shot dead after trying to escape a conflict she had with another student. In a quote by ABC News, it is reported that police officers should follow this creed. They shall not fire fleeing people, should not fire moving vehicles, and should not fire through a vehicle window unless circumstances clearly warrant that the use of a fire alarm as a final means of defense. In this instance, none of these rules were followed, showing that police officers are not serving the students. And now, who exactly goes to prison? As seen in this graph here, Black people predominantly fill prisons, with them being admitted 4 times as more likely than their white peers. Dehumanization. The process of being processed in is humiliating, breaking down the prisoners to show who was in charge, again, as seen through schools. In Revisions of Abolition, a movie, a prisoner described it as crossing the line from human to not only animal, but being owned. This ownership is reminiscent of slaves being broken in when brought by new owners. As you can see here, we see some echoes of slavery, with slaves being captured on and searched on slave ships, in comparison to prisoners being stripped down and humiliated when in trouble. As seen here, there are blatant powers of authority in charge. a journey in chains. It sometimes took several months to transport captives to the coast, and they were often sold and resold to several new owners along the way. Once they reached the coast, some captives were taken to slave forts or compounds where they waited for a slave vessel to arrive. This is a journey in chains that many people in slavery saw themselves in. And it still continues with prisoners being forced to relocate to different prisons when in trouble. Business and slavery. After Reconstruction, many former slave owners struggled with labor. Many white people were desperate to keep black people in chains, were desperate to keep them down. The 13th Amendment provided a loophole by saying, except as punishment for a crime whereof the party shall have been duly convicted. With this amendment, it legalized slavery as long as it was a punishment for a crime. And a quote here, by imprisoning innocent people under Jim Crow rules and then leasing them to local farms for as little as $9 a month, states earned a profit while the prisoners received no pay and faced dangerous working conditions. This allowed plantation owners to continue operating without having to pay workers in the fields. This is very similar to the working conditions of current prisoners. They are forced to work for pennies. They are forced to work endless hours for mere pennies, keeping them down and keeping labor up in prisons. Slavery is equal to free labor. Prisons overlook labor laws and law in order to maximize profit off of prisoners. This allows prisons to work as a for-profit business, benefiting off of the grueling hours, backbreaking work that prisoners have to do. Their responsibilities include many things, such as tending to livestock, picking vegetables, aggregating farmland, and providing food for larger companies as seen here. These are my resources. Thank you.